Well, good morning, everyone. It's good. Can you hear me? Yeah, we'll start here in a few seconds. I think we have a couple other people coming. But yep, some open spots here in the front. Get my hair did. There we go. These are comfortable chairs, too. We have hair dryers here as well for a conversation in the beauty salon, right? There we go. It's the way it normally works out. Yeah. So yeah, I think we're ready. So we'll go ahead and get started. So I'm excited to introduce and have a conversation with Izabela Lopes.
Thank you.
Yeah, Isabella is the managing director at Google Technical Services, or GTech, is the division where she works. And we wanted to have some real talk. You're on mute. Learn more about your story. All right. So to begin, go ahead. Opening.
No, no.
Okay.
I was
Yeah, so we'll just jump in.
adjusting on my beauty
There
chair
we go.
here,
Get comfortable. There we are.
getting comfy.
Yeah. And so the first question that I had is, who is Isabella Lopes?
Oh my goodness, I was reflecting on that question and just really thinking about the journey that got me here. And by the way, thank you so much for having me here. I was so inspired about the speakers and their journeys, how they were sharing their vulnerabilities. Who am I? I was born and raised in Brazil. I've been in this country. I lived there during my teen years, but I've been in the United States for about 30 years, but have always been passionate about tech. Loved working with people. But I grew up in Brazil, and I still consider myself to be very much Brazilian, even though I've been here for a long time. And, as we were preparing for this section, like I was really thinking about the intersectionality of ourselves, of being a Latina, woman in tech, being a leader, experiencing the double bind that all of women experience. That Barbie video is spot on. And I have the privilege and the responsibility of raising two young men. I'm a single parent, and it's woo, you know. Why am I saying all these things? Because to your point, it's like, who am I? I am a mosaic of a person who really think about all my personal experiences show up at the door before the professional that I am, my value system, my work ethic. And in this transition of coming from Brazil to the United States, there is that component of living the American dream. There is this component of watching your parents' relationships and what you want to take for yourself or not out of that. And my mother didn't finish high school. My father, I was the first one in my family to graduate from college. My siblings who were older ended up graduating from college, but you kind of grow up and you observe those experiences and you're like, I want that. I don't want that. And, I know some of your questions you ask about what do you control, what don't you control. But, how I got here has been very much a product of the beautiful experiences I've had, the lessons, all these transitions. English is not my first language. So all of those, the beauty of our narratives and our stories that really brings us to interact with whatever roles and people that we have in the work environment. So hope I'm kind of doing justice in answering your question, but it's all of that.
Yeah, all those different things, intersectionality, the different levels of the things that you can see at face value, but there's a number of things underneath that you may not see. And all of these things are important with that. So I appreciate that. Next question I had is curious about just some different highlights from your career, as well as just what you do at Google now with the GTech group.
Yeah. In terms of highlights, and I was listening to the speakers earlier, the highlights are outputs of your journey, right? And in that journey, you need angels, and you can't do it by yourself. And so I just kind of wanted to mention that because a lot of the highlights I've had, and in that journey of getting frustrated and learning and kind of pivoting and being exposed to a pivot that you kind of didn't see, I think a lot of these experiences that I was able to experience, some of these accomplishments, were either because mentors gave me a chance. I remember my first management job. I was at this startup, and Gary Bonilla, who is still my mentor to this day, he said, "We're doing a reorg. There's a new team. You're going to manage this team." I looked at Gary and I was like, "Gary, I've never managed people before. Like, I can't manage these people." He was like, "No, you're going to do it. Like, this is the right thing. You can do it." And so to your point, it's like these accomplishments, right? Like, so for me, have really been about, I always knew that I love working with people. I was undergrad, I wanted to do computer information systems, and I took a COBOL class, and COBOL did me wrong. My program wouldn't run because I was missing a dot. And then I saw my entire life flashing before my eyes. I was like, I don't want to spend the entire remainder of my professional career looking for missing dots behind a desk. So that was and I was like, but I love technology and I love people. And so I knew, to your point, like, these accomplishments, they came because I knew that there were core areas that I didn't want to let go. So yes, COBOL, I didn't turn out to be an engineer, but I ended up getting a degree in marketing and doing a lot of digital marketing. And to this day, I stayed true to that. But in terms of those accomplishments, they really have been, learning, getting to experience different orgs, making those pivots to different teams. Like the team that I lead today, I lead a bunch of engineers. I'm not an engineer. I got an interview question that was like, "You've never managed engineers before. Why are you qualified to do this job?" And I was like, "Oh, good question." I was like, "I better think quick." And I said, "Look, we're all people looking to fulfill, find purpose, and do great things." So I would start there. That's kind of how I answer the question. But like for me, like these accomplishments in my careers have been, yes, getting promoted, yes, working for great people, yes, accepting those gifts of pivots when they were given to you, and I was laid off in 2002, a week before Christmas, from an ad agency. And then in April 2003, I joined Google. So I've been here for over 20 years. But I sent an email to jobs at Google, right? It's like, so sometimes there's things in our life that come and you're like, this sucks. Nobody wanted to get laid off a week before Christmas. But it got me here. So, I'm trying to answer the question from like a more philosophical perspective, but to me, it has been the accomplishments that I look back have been really seizing those opportunities, staying true to yourself, inspiring other people. Those to me are like accomplishments in a sense.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah. One thing I really love about what you just said is the fact that we're all human beings and equalizing with that. When I think about like the beauty salon and the barbershop, if you think about it, that's the common denominator of why people come through the barbershop door. They're human being, their hair needs a trim or their hair needs to get did. And that's just a neat reminder that that's true in other contexts, in all contexts. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thanks for the question.
Yeah. Next question I have is share about a memorable time when you were put on mute. If anything comes to mind.
So many. And I know, again, like I got a lot of inspiration from the previous conversation with Felicia and Kripa. At Google, there's definitely different orgs you have different experiences. And I've been privileged in a way that when that question got asked of me, I started really thinking about not so much who was muting me, but how I was muting myself. So that, came first for me, especially as you come from a different country, you're trying to survive on that visa, and you kind of like, there's a cultural simulation that came with that of muting yourself and blending in, right? And doing that American dream and kind of like blending in this general market company. So Google was the first company that I worked with that was not Hispanic or Latina in nature. So this is the fourth company that I've worked on. So until the diversity report came out, I was just kind of like heads down, blending in, not trying to be the loud Latina, not to have too many ideas, not to be the life of the party. So when that question got first posed to me, like I really thought about that self-muting. And then, once the diversity report came out, I started kind of like looking at the numbers, and I was like, oh my God, I'm like 1.2% of Latino leaders. And I'm like, what can I do to really, amplify? So to me, it was kind of like that personal jersey of like self-muting. If I pivot to, be in a room or who is muting you, I think the examples that came to mind have been in previous, there was one specific example where I had a boss way back in the day, and we had done this client meeting. The presentation went well. It was a big name client. The client had agreed to all the things I was in advertising side for Google for many years. So we did that. Client had agreed. We came back, and then this boss that I had at the time kind of like, hey, we need to redo this deck. And I was like, what do you mean we need to redo this deck? We had the meeting. It was great. Client great. And so we spent many hours like rejiggering things and kind of rethinking, and it was for a silly reason, was to enter a contest within internally. And so in a way, to me, like that was almost like a weird way of like giving feedback, but then it was kind of muting the success that I had led, and so it was almost like taking that power back from the success of the meeting, which I kind of interpreted not so much an active muting, but almost like passive in a way.
Yeah.
But, I think the other examples that were cited today, sometimes it happens. Other meeting that I had I came and I presented the plan, and I had 15 minutes to present, and there was a lot of derailing, and then I started being the scapegoat for things that the topic that I had brought up had nothing to do with. So that was hard. That one was hard. And then my lesson out of that was, okay, what could I have done, to the question you asked, to take control? If I had to play this over again, what would I have done differently? But it happens. It happens often, and I think the feedback that the previous speakers had shared on like taking your power back, communicating effectively, I think those are all great ideas, and I took a lot of notes from them as well. But it's just being aware. I think it's kind of really, really important.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, so we're going to open it up here for questions in a moment. So if you can think of any things, go ahead and get ready. But I had one last question here before we do that. And the question is this. As a leader in a position of influence, what are some ways that you're helping people to come off of mute?
Yeah, I in 2014, I went back to school, and I got an MA in organizational psychology. I mentioned earlier, I love working with people, and I really wanted to understand the psychology of organizations. I find that fascinating. And that degree really helped put a new lens on how I observe people in the work environment. So I do a lot of observing. Roles people tend to take in groups, group dynamics, who's talking, who's not, non-verbal cues of, exactly what Felicia was talking about, like the hand signals, how are people receiving that? And I think that's really, really important. So one thing that I do, if it's within my organization, I do a lot of observing. A few years ago, I had a new boss, and he was trying to get a hold of like, what's this new peer, this new group that I'm managing. And I know it was talked earlier about how you're differentiating yourself. And I was like, the new boss not seeing this. So I kind of volunteered to him like, hey, here's some of the dynamics that I'm observing. And based on like, the skill that I had, but I think, for me, like observing the room, educating others, and I'm not saying go out and get a degree yourself so that you can have that lens, but it's about, if your organization is really practicing allyship appropriately, then play an active role. And I try to do that. I try to lead by example. I try to educate my peers. So that I think that's a big one. And then just kind of continue to share your story. I think for Latinx Heritage Month, I probably did about 8 or 9 panels. This is my second external event, which, I'm really excited about it because I think we need to keep talking about how to get inspired by each other, how to share our stories. I'm inspired by your stories as much as you might be taking a lesson or a note from mine. And I do think that it's about that. It's about living your truth, living your value, and kind of taking space in the room for who you are. And it might take time, right? Like if you're earlier on in your career, there might be some sense of, there's too much risk if I do that. Or this organization's appetite for receiving the space that I want to be my true self might not be right. And then the question is, should you be at that? Is this environment really propelling you to succeed? To how much more can you mute yourself at the expense of whatever success is defined by someone else? Is that success for you, or joy, or happiness? So, that's kind of like how I think about it. It's like I have to live my values and my brand. At the end of the day, if I don't get that promotion, or if it's not talked about in my accomplishments, I can put my head on my pillow and say that I've lived my brand authentically.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. When you live your authentic self, it takes a lot of stress off of you to start because you're not experiencing something that you're not supposed to be. You're being who you are supposed to be. And at the end of the day, outcomes are outcomes is what I'm gathering from that. So that's great. So now we'll turn it over to you. And curious to hear any questions that, we got a few. So we'll go based on what I saw. So we'll go here in the back and over here next. Yeah, we have microphones. So go right ahead.
So it sounds like, Izabela, you are a lifelong learner, which I have a great appreciation for. And it based on some of the things that you said, you allow your curiosity to lead you to the next adventure, like going back to school and being curious about how people work in an organization. Would you say you already have like a benchmark in your mind as it relates to your success, or are you curiously working toward what success means to you?
Yeah. And look, I'm not. Thank you for your question. I'm not sitting here and just philosophically saying, oh, just navigate life as you see it coming. I'm a very driven person. I find, I'm motivated by money. I tell my boss all the time, like, hey, my number 2 motivator is money.
Get real. Keep
Like,
it real.
and it took me
Here for nothing.
years to be able to like get those words out of my mouth. But I'm like, well, but I am. I'm like, why isn't it coming out? Because he knew that my number 1 motivator was learning, and I lived those values, right? Like I went back to school. I got my 2 master's degrees. I worked full time as I was going to school full time. So you kind of got to take that. But I think to the core of your question is, for me, accomplishment and attainment and kind of setting that path has evolved over time. I mentioned earlier, I single parent today. I value a lot more flexibility and time with my children than I did when I wasn't single parenting. I love traveling. And by the way, I only realized how much I was traveling for work at the year before I got divorced, because I was trying to figure out custody and all of that. And I was like, oh, I'm not traveling that much. But when I looked at the travel schedule that I had, I was like, oh my God, I'm traveling all the time. And I love that because I was traveling the world. I visited 29 Google offices. But to me, the value of what gets me excited is different today, right? And so I think it's kind of honoring that. I know earlier the Reverend was talking about, right, like yourself and your soul. And I think that journey, only yourself can say what it is. And she was spot on. A lot of people think about what are others expecting of you, but we don't spend time looking within ourselves, right? Like, would I be happier if I'm leading a smaller team and spending more time at home? Like, so what are those trade-offs? And I think the answer sometimes it lies within yourself, and to be able to have that open conversation about what are the gives and takes. I think for me, I want to continue I have aspirations of making sure that the composite for Google VPs look different. I'm counting, like, okay, how many Latinas are on the VP reporting to whom? I do the count. I look at the diversity reports, like, oh, we moved 0.2%. Is that good enough? Like, what can I do to celebrate our leaders, to look what diversity looks like? But to me, it's like, it's that answer, that drive, what's driving you every year lies within yourself, and you got to be very clear about it. And that narrative, I know Kripa mentioned about, has to be clear too, because you're going to need others to help you seize those moments. And if they don't know what your narrative is, they're not going to be able to help you. You got to plant those seeds.
They can't amplify you. Yeah. Great question. Yeah. So we'll go to back. So we'll go. I think you were second, and we'll go here next. There we go.
Thank you so much for your authentic sharing, Izabela. I'm really appreciating it. And so I'm wondering if you might be able to share a little bit about navigating feelings of uncertainty, if you have felt that with your leadership when it comes to leading a team, both maybe like what is your inner self-talk around navigating uncertainty with decision making, or how are you being conscientious in your communication with others on your team when you sense that there's a lot of uncertainty that is afoot, but maybe people are, it feels vulnerable to name that, and people are afraid of making mistakes. That would be very valuable to me to hear.
Yeah. No, thank you. Very relevant to what we're living through in the world, right? In corporate America, with consumers experiencing, right, like the companies survive because whatever it is you're selling, services and products are getting on the hands of those consumers, right? And so I'm just kind of like setting the path for the context of what you're talking about, ambiguity. It's happening more than ever now. And so a lot of leaders, if you're good at what you do, if you're a good leader, and you're gonna have to be, and from a leadership perspective, I tell my entire team, by the way, you all have earned a PhD in leadership for the last 3-4 years, because it's been hard to lead in these times, even for a seasoned, experienced leader. And so, fast forward to your question, what I try to do is, what do we know to be true? What happens with change management is people fear the sense of loss of what they knew, of what was familiar. And so you have the controllables and the non-controllables, right? There's stuff, acknowledging what you can control, I think it's important. Talking about the controllables, I think it's important. But I think there's also this domain of, what do we know to be true? Here's what I shared with them. I said, what do we know to be true? Customer centricity is not going away. So let's keep focusing on that. Operational rigor has always been important since the beginning of the year. Let's keep doing that, more important than ever. AI, big topic. We launched that I/O, a number of solutions. And by the way, my team had a solution at I/O.
There we go. There we go. There we go.
Big props to my engineers, tech team, who's doing great. Like AI, not going away, right? So I think as leaders, like, we really have to decode and translate what are those broader themes so that we can continue to inspire people to find some comfort on the focusing facts of the things that we know are gonna be true. Again, like, that was just my contact on this experience, but if you have a specific scenario that you want to get more tips, like, I'm happy to, connect at lunch as well. But it's hard leading through adversity and change. It has really pushed leaders to deliver. And the role of a manager, the role of a leader has become so much more important, because you can completely mess up the career of 5, 6, 7 people. And we all can sit here, because we're all professionals. You remember that one bad boss you had. Like, it's not great. It's not a good experience. Maybe you learned a lot, but don't be that person, right? Like, how do you, and back to the environment dialogue that we were having, the way I think about my career too is, like, the number one guidance that I have for myself is, who am I working for? Because if that person doesn't know what they're doing, they're not competent, they don't have empathy, they're not inclusive, I'm not at a point in my career to invest time on experiencing your lessons. That's just where I'm at.
That's real talk right there.
That's just where I'm
That's
at.
called real talk right there.
I follow the leader. Like, yeah, that's just where I'm at.
Great, great. Yeah, so go to here.
Thank you for sharing your experience and your background. One of the things I heard you say earlier was that when you started, you just kept your head down. You didn't want to be the life of the party. And you felt like you were muting your personality. And so even when you were put into a certain position, you felt that, why am I being put in this position with engineers or people that you didn't necessarily do that job previously. And so with that, wanted to know, because you've clearly explained that you're being your true self now and just moving forward, was there a defining moment or defining event that made it, that change in your head, that click in your head, is like, I've got to move a little bit differently? Because to a degree, if you're not being your true self from the beginning, you might not be as productive or as the best that you can be from the beginning. And so how, if someone's coming into a position, they can be able to start in that way so that they can be the most productive going into whatever position they're going to?
Yeah. I think it was Thank you for the question. I think it was over time for me. And there's a component of the choices I made in that journey. Before I became a director at Google, and it's, when you make it to director, it's a big deal. You're like, oh my God, you've made it. And you feel like you're climbing Mount Everest and all of that. But I spend, and we have levels here, but I spent like 10 years as a level 7 being successful, putting my heads down, doing, my thing. In those 10 years, I had interviewed for 15 director roles, all of which I was unsuccessful. And towards the end, and by the way, I ended up getting to director at Google, not through that route. My last 2 roles didn't used to exist. So, one of my blind spots in that lesson, in that journey, was the role that might give you all the things you need and want and fulfillment might not exist today. So my last 2 didn't. But in focusing on the question that you're saying, like, I think for me, it was the journey of the lessons that I had myself in those 10 years for those roles that I had interviewed. I remember the first one, someone asked, where's your business plan? And I was like, well, nobody told me to come up with a business plan. This was like years ago. But everybody else who was much better networked was told that they needed a business plan. So they did the business plan and they got the job. Like informal, unequal approaches to like interview, bad, right? Fast forward 15 years later, the last role I interviewed that I didn't get, one of the VPs came to me and he said, hey, Izabela, you didn't get the role, but you show up really well in this interview, and I want to be your endorser for your next thing. And I was like, and by the way, I had prepared, I had rehearsed, I did all the things within my control. And I was like, you know what? That role wasn't on the cards for me, but I want something out of that process, right? I want an endorser. So I think coming back to your question, I think it was over time that I kind of like had those lessons and those epiphanies and really learning where the blind spots were about the roles of tomorrow. And it's just that affirmation that you're like, I'm doing great. I work for a great leader. Does when I come to work, do I have joy? Do I have joy in engaging with the people that I do? Does my leader inspire me? Am I doing work that when I go home, I'm excited to tell my kids? And I think it's like, you're going to have good and bad days, but, are you getting closer to finding that joy and fulfillment within yourself? I think, it was over time that those things built for myself.
Great. Yeah. Go ahead.
Do you want me to use the microphone?
Oh, you can. There's one.
Oh. Go ahead.
Okay, we'll go you next. Perfect. Oh, okay. You're up.
You mentioned earlier about messing with people's careers. That happens, and it's management's a nasty business from time to time, because especially if people are insensitive in the decision-making roles. How do you mess with people's careers that need to be messed with? Because they are silencing, or I call it self-censorship. They're invoking self-censorship among people, and they take the attitude, when I want your opinion, I'll give it to you. And you're working and trying to work your way up a career, and I'm kind of in a position now where I've got a middle manager that when I was inserted into the organization, I want to bring out everybody's skills and comfort, and we were coming back to an office, and we wanted to see it flourish. And we got that middle manager tapping the brakes constantly. No, don't stand out. And when he's gone, things will go back like they are and like they were. This is somebody's career that needs to be messed with because they're taking 30 other people's lives and requiring them. They don't even have a microphone. They can't unmute it. Or then there will be, I was going to say, repercussions. How do we work our way through to make sure that those who have developed a voice keep that voice and can bond together and form a different, more productive organization as opposed to just going back? Is that a fair question, or should I step aside?
That's a good question. I got some.
No, I
Go ahead.
have.
Yeah.
So I have plenty of ideas because I have no patience for, like, can I say the S word, for like bad management? It's like it's a calling. It's a calling, and you better come, and it's an opportunity, and you better do a good job. Like, it's a calling, and some years past, like I had someone who was trying to be a manager because that's how they were going to get promoted. And I'm like, no, wrong. Like, don't go there because I find being a leader, being a manager, it is a sacred, there's sacredcy in that. It's sacred. What I would say to your situation is, and we're, it's at the core of like performance management. And I'm also a part of like the global rollout from my orgs. We've been doing year change management on our performance management systems to make sure that it's fair, that it has its checks and balances. So it's been a real treat and good experience that I'm getting kind of to see on it. And I think the answer might lie in your organization around what are those checks and balances about what these manager roles are meant to achieve. At Google, we have both what you're doing and how you're doing it. And I've seen plenty of people having had great what's. Hey, what I'm doing is great, but your how sucks. And, if I want to be someone who is just trying to plowing through getting things done, but not treating you with respect, your organization needs to have those checks and balances. So maybe is reevaluating the processes that today exist, right? Because the same way you want to assess the competency of this person, you want to assess the person who's doing it right too. And it needs to be consistent, because it could also be, let me paint the opposite scenario. Let's say that this manager is actually a good manager, and for some reason the team didn't get promoted and they're mad at the manager. Like, let me just paint the flip side. You need checks and balances to validate like feedback on how this manager is doing from the people. You need what's the what that they're doing, the how they're doing. So it needs to be a multitude of data points as well, that it's treated, approached, communicated for all managers, because that way you have to be consistent in how you're managing, and the process has to be very, very clear. And that's kind of what I learned in the way we're managing now. Like, we have quarterly check-ins with everybody. The employee is supposed to come and say, what are the top 3 things you're doing well? So that feedback process has to be frequent as well. And yeah, I think it's a number of things that have to be in place in order to address some of the situations you're having. But I agree, like if you're not doing your job well, you have to start with, what does that mean? What does doing the job well means? And it has to be consistent for everybody in the org.
Yeah, it sounds like that situation is ripe for some real talk, to say the least. To say the least.
I can come in and consult in your organization.
Oh, yeah. Makes it more complicated. Yeah.
That's
That's a tough
tricky.
one.
Yeah.
Appreciate the question. Yeah. So we'll go here. Yep.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Chelsea. Nice to meet you. First, I just want to acknowledge you invited us into, I was doing the math, like a 21-year from layoff to this point in your career journey that you've been on. So I just first want to acknowledge that, like, as women, sometimes we say these amazing, unbelievable things or hardships. And you said you were laid off, you became a mother, you went through a divorce, you went through 15 rejections, and then, you're at this point. So I just want to acknowledge
Still here
that you're
Yeah.
still here
and
Yeah.
excited about
And
this.
Doing it.
give
Doing
you-
the thing. Yeah. Yeah.
give you your flowers
Yeah.
because that's not, that's not easy at all. So I think my question really actually is about, how, like, where did you find support in those transitions? And as your life expanded when you recently became a mom myself. And so in these inflection points of your career where you're very driven, like you said, but you also have these additional responsibilities and these life happenings that are impacting, either how you're viewed in the workplace or how you're able to show up because you have more demands on your time. Just how have you found support or grounding or, what has given you fuel to keep going?
Yeah, no, thank you. I think COVID really kind of taught us that lesson of humanity when we were all going through, because it took away all the distractions of life, right? And all of a sudden, it was you and those around you. And you found out who was there for you real quick, right? Like, for me, like, as I've learned through COVID in the last 3-4 years, going through the divorce and all of that, I have different pockets of communities that kind of feed my soul. I like to use a lot of that nomenclature, like who's feeding my soul and what's feeding my soul. So, I have a group of, my closest friends. We all live next to each other. I'm the type of leader that I need to hug you and see you, and like that's just how I am. And so for me, it can't be I have very close friends that are distant, but like seeing you and hugging you and crying with you and all of that, I think that feeds my soul. So I have different pockets of people, but even at work, if your organization and Google's, I know we're not a perfect company, but I have always found community in our employee resource groups. I really have. And even though in my own journey, I didn't join OLA for a long time because I didn't feel that the brand, it's OLA's our employee resource group. Because as a Brazilian, I didn't find, like, I speak Spanish, but that's not my first language. But I didn't find that OLA was representing me as a Brazilian. And in my own journey, I was like, what the hell am I talking about? I'm like, why not? Like, we all have a lot of similarities. So a group that really has fed my soul at work has been our employee resource groups. And sometimes I show up as a leader to give empathy, but sometimes I also want to show up as a participant because your story inspires me as much as mine might inspire you. So I think that's really important. And I know that the work environments, it's different for different companies. You might not have that outlet, right? Like you might be in an industry, let's take the finance industry. Maybe they're not talking about their feelings and what's happening across the globe. But at Google, we are. And this is why I've stayed for so long, because if the humanity in the company and the investment is not going towards finding the community, I mean, we spend a lot of hours at work. Like, that better be there for you to kind of come. And maybe sometimes it's just having that 1 hour with that one leader talking about your narrative and what you experienced, that you're going to walk out of that meeting feeling lighter. And you're like, wow, Larry has a really beautiful story. And I have mine too. and mentally you might be in a better place to show up at the table and be a productive professional. And I do think as humans, we need those moments of connection. But yeah, for me, it's everywhere, but I do have that at work, and I really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so we wanted to do, okay, we'll do one more question here, and then I got something special for all of you after this. Go ahead.
Maybe just one question, and it's sort of through the lens of allyship and building belonging. And in the previous session, we heard of not being invited to lunch, for instance, and that being exclusionary. We heard about your own experience going through 15 rejections and sometimes not having all the information. And I'm just curious, as leaders, how we reduce what I call information asymmetry for people, because that can be created through the classic, you got the information at the country club on the golf course while playing, or you got invited after work. And not everybody can go after work because maybe they are a single parent, or maybe they don't have they're not at the point in their career where they can afford a country club membership, or they simply don't have the confidence to join the group to lunch. So how do you as a leader intentionally create a culture in which we reduce information asymmetry?
Yeah, that's a real big problem. Thank you for the question. The way to kind of mitigate some of that is about making sure that you have inclusive practices, right? I remember years ago, our way of bonding and building community was like the happy hour. Like, okay, everybody, let's do the happy hour. Well, fast forward to now, like people have to go home to their families. People have to go take care of an elderly parent, right? And so I think when we started talking about inclusivity and belonging, okay, what is the new composition of that happy hour? Is it the lunch? Is it, other ways to kind of like have first of all, you have to be aware, right? And you have to want to make that inclusion, and you're not going to be able to minimize some of those blind spots until you have that person in the room giving you those ideas. That's why diversity is really important, right? Like if you don't have a single parent in your room, you're not going to know that, by the way, I'm not going to make the happy hour. Or if you don't have someone who has a different context, you're not going to know. That's why it's really important to like understand what is inclusivity and how would people feel more invited without being pointed out and singled out. And I think it's a very sensitive and needs to be navigated with a lot of care. The second piece that I will share with you is in the process of like making inclusion and belonging, there's a real tax for people to educate allies by resharing their story, because that makes them live trauma again. So if you're an ally and you can connect with the stories around racial inequity, show up and educate yourself before you even get to the door, right? Like we have wonderful programs at Google, and they were started by individual contributors. It's called Racial Equity Hour. That group curate all kinds of different things. Like they were talking about voting rights, and I attended the one about Martin Luther King, and I had never seen some of the videos they showed. So education, if you're an ally, it's on you to show up at the door with as much as you can. So I think there's something to be there as well, that it's not just, hey, I'm an ally, educate me so I can understand your experience. That is a very passive way to showing up, and I think there's something to be there. We do a lot of allyship courses for people at Google, and those have been like, we didn't used to have them. And so like redefine what allyship is, because then you're gonna know more and you're gonna be much more in tune about that everybody's experience.
Yeah, great. Appreciate it. Great answer. So what I wanted to do now, if you can go to the next slide, I wanted to get all of you talking amongst yourselves, the chance to unlock some stories and share some things. These are just some quick prompts here. You can do it with the person beside you or a few people together. Wanted to just invite you to think about these questions, to share a moment when you were put on mute. How did it feel? How did you respond? The different things there. But it's just a chance to get all of you talking. So we'll do this for a few minutes. And then after that, I'll call everybody back. We can do it literally sitting here right now. And then we'll just get some reflections and some thoughts, and then we will complete our time. So with that, so go ahead and pick a partner or a neighbor or a couple of neighbors to do that. All right, everybody. I'm loving the buzz that is in the room, because that was the goal, is to get everybody talking, get the different real talk moments available, and having an opportunity for all of you to be involved in the conversation. So I definitely appreciate it. So I got a situation here for you. So in the next few minutes, me as well as maybe one other person is standing between all of you and lunch. All right? So Here's how we'll play
Lunch
this.
is better than drinks, Larry. So
Yeah, there we go.
no, like the other way around. Like if it was drinks, it would be bad.
Yeah. So I'm thinking I wanted to just hear a reflection or two or some type of takeaway. We won't have time for everybody because, what's waiting for you on the other side of the door there. But so who has the best, most insightful, most real talk reflection or thoughts? There we go. There it is. There it is.
Oh, there it is.
Yes.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lucian White. I'm here to represent Honey and Vomit on Sonic Psalms. The point that we were discussing, the young man next to me, is when is putting yourself on mute, it actually is beneficial to the end game of the result and outcome of what you want to achieve, because your conflict that you might create being your authentic self to an individual that isn't willing to receive will put you in a position to not get to the bag. And the end game, ladies and gentlemen, the number 2 motivator?
Money.
I mean, or whatever success is to you. Whatever it is, I like the
Real
money
talk.
myself, but the reality of it, and
real.
there's the mic drop right there.
Yeah, good stuff. Cool. Talk to her. You don't have to.
No, I mean, I
No, seriously though.
Yeah.
Like, should you mute yourself? Sometimes, isn't it necessary when you're listening to that and you just gotta schmooze them and say, you know what? Yes, but the conversation we had, you paid me for this already. But it's we're gonna, you know what I mean? We're gonna get to the end result.
Yeah.
And you have to just be like, for how long? Well,
Yeah.
and then that, of course, mental health in the long game is swallowing that, of course, would be detrimental. But I mean, isn't it what we're supposed to do in leadership? Is you have to swallow your shit and deal with it as a leader.
Yeah.
Come on, get it.
Oh, I'll give you this.
I think in our group, we represent different ages, which we all look fabulous. So we're all in the 20s. It doesn't matter. But I think there was encouragement in this group of like, with age comes kind of this feeling of like, I'm going to say something because I've earned the right to say something. And so my peers were able to encourage me is like, oh girl, you just wait. You're like getting close to the age where you're about to be able to just say it without. And so I actually think, you guys kind of said maybe there's times to not say it. But this group was talking more about sometimes you have to say it and you have an intergenerational responsibility to prepare those coming behind you. And by you saying something, they can be better. So that's kind of merges it all.
the component of like group dynamics, who's the spokesperson of the group, who is taking up all the projections. And we have to be like, you're right, like we have to be careful with that. Like, the Barbie movie is like real. You're too aggressive, you're not aggressive enough, you're too sweet, you're not sweet enough, you talk too much but you don't, but it's like, what day is it? But back to the original two question or comment, I do think that like there's a differentiator between strategic, right? And seizing your moment and the trade-offs, right? Like, and I know you mentioned about like for how long you're gonna keep doing that. If if the composition of the multiple scenarios that you're living through is 90% of that, are you yourself gonna be happy navigating that space? And I think like it's not simple, right? Like it's not one scenario; it's multiple interactions about maybe to your point this project, can you live with that for the benefit of this project getting done, right? Like, is this a temporary thing? Is this blowing up your soul, right? So it's a complexity that you have to like look at all the variables and like really validate for yourself, do I want to be here in this environment? And am I okay with this?
I love that.
As an ally, if you keep saying, I'm going to wait strategically until I make the next rank, the next job, the next title, are you really being an ally? If there's nothing to cost. So I've got a board next Tuesday where a predominantly group of white men will sit in a room with no windows and they will decide whether I'm going to be an admin. How long do I sit and wait to say what we're doing isn't including people, isn't allowing us to be our best organization, is leading to suicide at the worst state where we don't think people belong. The flip side is if you don't make admiral, next June 1st you retire.
You can also change your board. That board needs representation too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, yeah. One final thought before we go to lunch. And I want to keep these conversations going because there'll be plenty of opportunities to keep talking. The first thing I thought about when you were sharing that was in relationships. For those who are parents in the room, I thought about teenagers. So how long do you keep yourself on mute when you're interacting with a young adult and they're trying to find their way? And I thought about, I have a son, he's 21 now, but during his teenage years, and we're going to get into some of the intergenerational stuff in the later segments this afternoon. But I was like, some of the things that he would do that I was very upset about. I'm like, wow, back in the 1970s and 1980s, like, dude, ooh, corporal punishment was a thing where I grew up. And I'm like, man, you better be lucky you're born in this decade. I don't know if you would have survived the 1970s and 1980s, especially back east too. And so, yeah, get your. I got a bunch of stories like that.
I can't be on mute like that. Like I'm a Brazilian mother. That doesn't work in my house.
Yeah.
You have my business. You know, I need privacy. Don't knock on my door before you come in. I'm like, excuse me? Like, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm knocking to let you know I'm coming in. Not as like, can I come
an option,
in? Like,
a choice, yeah. Yeah, and so I just thought about the long term just with the relationship. And so when I think about my son, 21 years old, he's getting up there, getting tall, all that. I'm like, all right, what generational things can I pass down that are valuable? And what are some things that I experienced, 30, 40 years ago that I'll keep that on mute. Because it doesn't help to pay forward stuff, generations from now when I'm not around. But the echoes of that creates more things. And so those are things on my things to wrestle with. Yeah, yeah. 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 When you're valuing the relationship overall. Yeah.
I think the takeaway for me, why I challenged it from the last session was, it's like, don't be on mute. Being on mute is a bad thing. But is it though?
Yeah. You both, yeah. You got one thought. Yeah, go ahead, Tabasa.
I want to carry that into from a cultural standpoint as well, because being on mute also is to adults. It shows a respect, and so
Yeah.
there is a time and place, and so I'm in that generational phase where my in-laws live with me, and they come from a generation where you don't necessarily say everything that you feel, and yet I want to get my kids to be able to speak their minds and be beyond that. But I still need to teach them how to be respectful and know where that fine line is to be mute and share their thoughts. So as we go through different cultures and generations, that also brings that.
Yeah, exactly.
Say something really
Go ahead,
quick,
yeah.
Because this came from our conversation. As a professor, I'm seeing it from a different perspective. My young men at HBCU, I have to decide to be mute with them because they make the assumption that I'm not doctor. And it'll be an adjunct who they've never seen before, and they're like Dr. Smith. And I have to say to all of them, I earned that same 5-year degree. And some of them I have to say multiple times, it's Dr. Guillory, it's not Ms. Guillory, it's Dr. Guillory. And just many things like that, working in leadership, they'll say, oh, I'm going to go ask Dr. Pajavis. Well, go ask him, but he works for me. So,
All roads lead back. All roads lead back.
Thank you for the compliment. I hired right. Thank you.
There we go. Yeah, prove it for yourself. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for a
Thank
great
you.
conversation. Yeah. Yep.
Thanks for having
Yeah.
me.
And so what we have next, there's a number of things you can get involved in here right outside the door. You probably saw it as you were walking over. The Wheel of Belonging, the Ikigai or Identities table is there. Interact, jump in. There's lunch downstairs. Enjoy yourselves. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.